Hey, Razfax here. Today I'm going to be looking at the Primary Arms 1-6X SFP ACSS. That's quite the mouthful and sounds like the name was assembled from a spoonful of alphabet soup. Name notwithstanding, it simply just means it's a 1-6X second focal plane scope with the ACSS reticle from Primary Arms. This optic is incredibly popular, so much so that I'm going to skip a lot of my standard review format and do something a little different. My friend has had this for several thousand rounds to speak to durability, and I've run it just shy of 700 rounds. I'm going to have more discussion about the concept of an LPVO like this. As a fun aside, this optic feels a little bit cursed to me. I've lost all the long-range footage and some of my regular B-roll from about 2 months, just a month and a half of shooting. I then decided to slap it on a 1522, the one I just recently reviewed, to try to get more footage, and the 1522 shit the bed, and it needs a new extractor. I'll probably have a video on that at some point. Regardless, this one hasn't cooperated with me very well in terms of filming, so there's not nearly as much B-roll, even though I've actually had this optic for quite a while. I think the optic knows Primary Arms guys aren't happy with me, so it's fighting back in the only way it knows how. A key thing to keep in mind when I start breaking into my rant here, this optic sells for $289, which is a very good price for an LPVO, assuming it does LPVO things. Also understand when I review stuff on this channel, I'm reviewing in the context of, here comes the dreaded word, tactical use. I buy, train, and LARP with this stuff because I want to be ready should I need to use it in whatever boogaflu, fantasy, whatever that might occur. So at the end of the day, all of the features I discuss must facilitate this goal, and just as good as doesn't always pan out. Finally, the most important disclaimer, I am a nobody. I just make fancy videos on the internet, and they're not even that fancy. This is my opinion. So if you watch this video, see all my points, you don't have to agree with all of them. These are just my points, and you can use it in your data to decide if you want to get this optic or not. Anyway, let's get started. My thesis, to use a pretentious word, here can be viewed in two ways essentially. Number one, this optic suffers from feature bloat. There's so many features that the features begin to be executed poorly because of the price point, right? It costs money to have features, so it can't execute its duty as an LPVO fully. Or the simpler version is this optic simply isn't good value for the money. That's some pretty aggressive claims, especially since this is $289. Let's kind of start going through the features and you'll get what I mean about feature bloat. First off, this thing has piss poor illumination. It might as well not have it in most scenarios. In the daytime with the sun out, the illumination does nothing. It kind of does things in low light scenarios if you kind of want to shoot at long range in the pitch black, I guess. More realistically, dusk. However, most cheap LPVOs have illumination issues. I think really only the RC2 and the Steiner PX4i have functional illumination. However, even with those, there are some issues, namely with the Steiner realizing their optic that was at $500 should probably be priced at $800, completely removing that from the budget price pool. The reticle, however, does a decent job compensating for this lack of illumination, so really not as big of a deal because it seems they designed around not having the illumination during the day. So it works-ish. It's a hell of a lot better than, let's say, the SIG Tango 4, which not only is not daylight bright, even though it's advertised as daylight bright, it also doesn't have a functional 1X reticle. Whatever. Let's move on. The eye box is not great. For context, I run LCANs and ACOGs quite regularly, so I'm used to having my eyeball physically touching the lens in order to get into that focal range. So when I say I'm not a fan of the eye box here, it might mean something. It's not great. Especially when you crank it to 6x and you're shooting from a standard position, right? You're up in the mountains, kind of trying to get whatever stabilized position you can. There are issues. That being said, with the illumination, most LPVOs suffer in this department. Corners had to be cut. I wasn't exactly expecting Razer HD eye boxes. That brings us on to the reticle. For 1x, this reticle is quite useful, as I said, because it mitigates a lot of the shortcomings of not having an illuminated reticle. That being said, in the pursuit of having a large reticle at 1x, there are some issues. The subtension lines are very thick, so when you're shooting out at long range, these lines are they're too big, right? They obscure a significant percentage of the target. Really around 300 yards is when it becomes a big issue, and I'll kind of get into that in a second. here comes the elephant in the room. If you watched my first looks video, I kind of discussed this, and unfortunately it's come to fruition. The glass quality and construction, or probably the combination of it, aren't very good. It's bad, actually. I'll just say it, it's bad. I wasn't expecting ACOG glass quality here or whatever, and I understand this is a value, budget-minded optic, so corners had to be cut. But the point I'm making is so many corners had to be cut to get all of those features I mentioned above that the glass quality had to suffer. And it no longer fills the niche of being an LPVO, in my opinion, or a functional LPVO, in my opinion, because of these cut corners. Let me elaborate. Once you get to the range where magnified optics are somewhat required, so let's just say 300 yards onward, maybe more, the glass quality actively begins to hinder your ability to take smaller profile shots. As you get out to longer ranges, all targets are small profile shots. In my case, even a 12-inch plate, but definitely on the 4-inch plate, I was having issues resolving the image, right? When you look at the full image, you're like, oh, okay, that's a beautiful image. But remember, when you're shooting, the size of your target relative to the whole scope picture is quite small. And that little small target isn't clear enough on this optic not to begin to hinder you on what you're looking at, right? There's that slight blur Tupperware effect, and the resolution, effective resolution, is drastically diminished if you have poor glass quality, which this does. Are you slightly to the left of the target? Are you slightly to the right? Are you aimed at the head? Are you aimed at the crotch? Are you looking at the dirt? I don't know. A lot of times it's really tough to distinguish that looking through an optic like this due to the optical clarity issues. Before you say it, this works at my range, I don't care. I literally made it work. That's not the point here. The point here is this optic slows you down when you're shooting at range, significantly so, and it can even make you miss shots. The guys at 9-Hole Review are shooting 600 yards with Milsurp AKs and fucking RPG sights. You can make a lot of stupid shit work. That's not the point here. The point of an LPVO is to enhance your ability to hit long shots at the expense of ruining your 1X. However, if your LPVO doesn't really enhance your long shots that much to the degree that you would expect, what's the point? Now back to my original statement. This optic has so many features, it forgot to nail the most important one. Usable optical clarity. I would have traded everything on this list for better glass quality. Like, all of this stuff on the list looks really good on paper and on YouTube reviews where you just rattle off all the features. But in practice, I need that glass quality to really feel comfortable shooting at range, right? And for those that say it's cheap, so it's okay, you're kind of missing the point. But in a vain hope of trying to convince you that your $300 optic isn't a Swarovski, let me try rephrasing this slightly. I think this optic is bad value. If you shoot with regularity, you'll find a lot of the issues I've listed above, and there's a very good chance if you shoot long range for any bit of time and you want to get better at it, you will outgrow this optic. It happened with me, and it happened with a lot of my friends, and it will likely happen with you. Thus, you need a new optic, and suddenly you didn't even save money in the long term as well. I legitimately believe that something like a Holosun Red Dot, like $200, or the SIG flavor of it or whatever, offers significantly more capability per dollar spent, because with that, you actually get something that excels at what it was designed for, 1X. Even the Primary Arms Prism 1X, something I'm beginning to review right now, I think is a better buy than the 1-6X second focal plane, ACSS, Primary Arms, whatever. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, buying cheap shit is, bad, right? I'm not saying go buy a Razor HD or an Attacker, right? I just recommended 2 super budget optics. Shit, even within Primary Arms, there are better options that will last you significantly longer into your shooting career, air quotes, like the 1-6X first focal plane optic, about $200 more, but a world difference in terms of glass clarity and performance. It's that much of a difference. Okay, thanks for watching. I know half of you will be like, hey, nice review, thanks. And the other half will be like, fuck you, brass facts. More like ass facts, right? I get it. I'm just trying to offer you my take on this optic. And for many, this might be good enough, right? Because magnification isn't all about shooting long range, right? There's the concept of shooting close range, but with magnification, like a low percentage shot at 100 yards, shooting into windows, right? You can't really see into windows with red dots from outside. LPVOs can, right? And in that sense, this optic works somewhat in that area, right? Urban style shooting. But my experience and many other people's experience, we've bought optics like this and then we've outgrown them and then we've not saved money in the first place. And that's, I think, a big point of what YouTube reviews are supposed to be for, right? You know, I've made a mistake, so I'm trying to pass that information on to you so you can be more informed, so you don't make that mistake or you understand what you're getting into. Anyway, that's enough of this bullshit. Whatever, you get the point. Anyways, I'll see you guys later.